everyone who is joining us at our very exciting, flashy online launch of A Woman's Guide to Business Domination. There we go. It is a very, very exciting book. It's got 18 different authors, and we are going to now be speaking with Ayumi Uyeda, who is one of our authors who has written a chapter on why segmenting our market smaller makes for bigger business. And I'm really excited to hear her sharing about that. I'm going to introduce you to those of you who do not know Ayumi. She has an affinity for discovering many cultures and countries. She's lived around the world, and she has this amazing attraction to solving the unsolvable. All right. And once you do that, you become stronger, and strong she is. She's had deep roots in healthcare. Most recently, she was managing director of Blackmore's Pharmaceutical. She's held general management and senior global positions with Bayer in Japan, Southeast Asia, USA in consumer health and pharmaceuticals. She's also set up successful e-commerce business models. So she started as a pharmacist, but she's gone a long way since then. She now has a company called Proppy, and I'm going to let her share a little bit now about, a little bit about herself, or why she chose this topic out of all the things she's done in business. Why is segmenting your market smaller good for making your business bigger?
Thanks, Annie. Thanks for having me. And it was a really great chance to write this chapter in the book, because it gave me the chance to reflect on a lot of my past and experiences that I've been through. So that was actually really quite fun. And why I chose this was because it's really funny when you're younger, and certainly when I was in my 20s and 30s as well, when you're working in large companies and you work with people who have maybe 10 or more years experience than you, it's often, I would find myself thinking, oh no, they know better than me. They're smarter. They've got a lot more experience. And particularly in the corporate environment, when I started to get into sort of marketing and general management roles, I'd historically been kind of in medical roles. So I sort of put myself in the basket a little bit of, I've never studied marketing, or I haven't done a business degree. So what do I know? They'll know much better because that's their subject matter sort of expertise, right? And this topic is an interesting one because it's one that I come up against every single day, honestly. And in every market I've worked in, I've found I've been challenged by people who are more senior than me, who have more experience, or even just a higher sense of urgency to generate more revenue faster. There's always that pressure to sell more, make more money in a company. And I've found that I've been challenged on plans and activities that we've been doing to try to go after bigger markets. And, I touch on a couple of these different sort of stories that I've had through my career. And it started very early, right? I was lucky enough to start working in the US in my mid-20s. And in the US, I think they were very good at market segmentation and understanding, for example, they're not all just Americans as one target. You've got, all different types of cultures in the different states. They would talk about there's 20 markets within New York, right? And you'd often hear as well, because we worked on global accounts, that China as well had many different markets, and you'd start with your different tiers of cities, but based on different demographics and socioeconomics, of course, you've got different segments there. And when I came back to Australia to work, I actually found that the segmentation mindset was not as developed. So this is, I'm talking in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it wasn't as well sort of developed. And that's changed a lot now. I think now with data, with digital, we've become very granular, and we try to target people at a very individual level if we can. Mm-hmm. But I will say, still, when you're planning a launch for a product or doing a business case, I still get challenged today, even that I should be going after a bigger market. And why I think this is, important, and what you sort of see that I covered off in the chapter a little bit, and particularly with Proppy as well, is being very selective about who we're going to help in the beginning. Because I think that if you go too big, you won't actually help anybody. You've got to be very specific about what is your specific need and what can I do for you? And then you might have the right to gradually expand, but you've got to start really, really small. And so that's kind of what I talk about in the chapter.
Oh, fantastic. I must admit, I've already had a sneak peek, everyone, and it is definitely fantastic. Fantastic chapter to read, and I love that, because often you think bigger is better, and it's go, oh, if I create all of this, then more people will come, or if I make even the product bigger, more bells and whistles. Not necessarily. Your customer is it's targeting. I think that core customer is the most important thing in business, right? And so with that means that actually tapping into their very, very specific needs, because you're going to solve those problems for them. That is just such great advice. And it's really interesting that you've actually had that even on a a global corporate level, because you're thinking, most people are thinking, oh, okay, they've got it really nailed, you just feel like, compared to the poor, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs who are out there trying to do it all themselves and learning along the way. We often look up, I suppose, and sideways, and think someone else has got it all covered. But there can be then a lot of waste, right? There's a lot of missing the target. Has been your experience?
Yeah, big companies make mistakes all the time. They do. They make so many mistakes. And sometimes if you look at something, I always think there's got to be a level of comfort or discomfort when you see what a business is doing. It's like brand stretch. I was in Kim Warehouse the other day, and I saw a gondola and full of products for men, and it was like men's shampoos, skincare, hair care. And you know what the brand was? It was VB, as in the beer. And it was a VB range. And I looked at that, and I should have taken a photo because it's such a great case study. But to me, that's a brand stretch that just doesn't work. So that's a beer company now trying to go after a segment in a market that they think there's, a new revenue stream in, but there's a huge level of discomfort there, right? It doesn't work because it's not close enough to the core and what it stands for. So I think there's case studies all around us. Just because the big companies do it, it doesn't mean they've got it right. And they definitely make mistakes, because all those decisions, remember, are driven by people like you and me, just normal people.
Exactly. Women of the world, we are the consumers by far. Like, women are good for business. They should be listening to us and tapping into us, and that's what their research should be doing, because that's a really interesting one, isn't it? Wow. And I think they've got that luxury as well, because if you've got enough money in the company, you can risk, I suppose, some of those campaigns, because even if they're an epic fail, they don't go under for it. They just kind of they go fishing a little bit. One, they should have done better market research, but two, sometimes they'll just try things because someone very passionate has sold it as a great idea. And we'll see how it goes. Whereas generally, those of us who are doing business, either by ourselves or just with a very small team, we don't have that luxury. We've got to be really focused, right? So what's your advice? And I know you've set up Property in the last couple of years. That might be a good example to use a new property management company. And so when you're starting new, how important was it for you to go totally niche and explain what that means and how you could have gone somewhere else but you didn't?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just give a quick bit of background on what property is so it makes sense. It's really aiming to address the housing affordability. Well, it is a crisis, is what they're calling it. But essentially, we've got an entire generation of millennials who are struggling to get into property, and the age of renting is climbing. You've got the multiple of sort of what it costs to buy a property versus the incomes is hugely disproportionate, and property prices have been growing at 11 times that of incomes. And there's all these metrics that you can look at which just point to the fact that the affordability is getting worse and worse. And we're going to, my concern in the long term is we're going to have a whole generation of people out there who have not been able to purchase property. And, you've got to remember our whole pension and superannuation schemes, all the calculations around that are based on an assumption that everybody will own property at the end, right? And so I think there's a big social issue looming. It is very long term, but it needs to be addressed now, because if it's not addressed now, it just gets harder and harder for people to be able to get ahead and set themselves up in a secure way. And so what property is, it's all about helping people to get into the market, into property sooner, in a very specific way, and that way is to help people to buy property in teams in a way that is offering full legal protection. So people are doing it anyway. They're buying with a partner, they're buying with siblings, but it's getting messy. And, you know, I really believe in doing it in a smart way. So, and the smart way is to have a clear co-ownership agreement that sets out who owns what portion, who's paying what. But we've set up all the operational parts so the finances can be separate. Even the property management, we've worked with property management agencies to set up everything so they can cope with multiple landlords in their IT systems, so that all your bills and rent coming in is split separately. So you never have to chase your co-owner for their half of the plumbing, for example.
Yeah.
So that's the setup by helping people to buy property in teams. And we've been very specific about targeting a certain subsegment of millennials. And there's a few there. It's sort of couples who are in a relationship, but they might be early in their relationship. They might not be ready to commit to each other, but it doesn't mean they can't get ahead. So, you know, on social media, we talk about the key ring before the diamond ring and sort of things like that. Also siblings, and then parents wanting to help their kids as well, so that they could get in together. You know, and all the way through that, when I talk to different people, I do get a lot of, you know, sort of inquiries also from investors and people saying, oh, you should cater to, you know, larger groups of people who have, you know, money so that they can buy really easily in investment groups. And look, I agree with that. It's absolutely an opportunity, and it might actually be the easier opportunity to some extent, because these are often people who have been through the property purchase journey. It's easy for them. It's not a difficult journey. It's not overwhelming for them, but it's not helping the right people, right? And so I'm quite adamant, I guess, about wanting to help the people who need the help and starting there, even if it is harder. And so that's where I think everything you do in your business does have to line back up to your purpose and the impact that you actually want to make. And so we've gone actually very, very narrow and niche. You know, I've had people challenge me as well and say, oh, you know, maybe you should be helping everybody, all the people, even just single people who need, I don't know, more education or more need this, you know, X, Y, and Z. We can help them. But to me, again, it's not specific enough. And I think a lot of people of a certain, it's not even like, it is within a certain age group, mostly. The younger you are, the harder it is. But it is affecting people across all income levels. It's not a low income issue at all. It's at all income levels. All need help to get in. So the thinking is, if you can get in with somebody else, you're at least building equity. I mean, nobody wants to buy half a property. That's not ideal. But a half is a stepping stone. And in the past, where units were the stepping stone, you know, to then upgrade to a house, people can't afford units now. So we want to be able to open up the market to help people buy units in a really smart, clean, no drama way, and be able to get out when they want as well.
Yeah.
And so that's really the thinking. And I get challenged all the time, you know, with people sort of saying, oh, you should do this and you should do that and you should go after, you know, this group. I've no doubt that these needs and opportunities everywhere, we're surrounded by them, but you've got to be very focused, I think, if you want to succeed.
Absolutely. And I think that's brilliantly highlighted, actually, for those of you listening on whatever business you're in, there will always be people telling you what you should be doing. It's very easy to be an armchair critic, right? You know, well, why don't you do this? You should be doing that. You go, well, it's actually my business. So for one, I love the way listening to you, Ayumi, that you've got, you know, it's just steely focus. You know, this is my business. This is the way it's been set up. It's for these people. This is your purpose. You know who you want to help and who you would like to help, but they're not you're in your total priority at this stage. And it might be for a whole lot of reasons, but they're important to you, and might be, you know, the whole reason that you set up that business. They might be aligned to your values. They might be aligned to just the market or your time and your ability. Every time you go and take on one of those other great ideas is then stretching you further and further, right? And then that then takes that time. We've only got so much time and energy away from other areas of your business. I love that comment in the feed. Great idea of Labor Party seniors downsize or cohabit. Yes. Um, yes. That's interesting. And for those of you who are also overseas, because we're in Australia, it really is the Australian dream that everyone owns a property. I know in other parts of the world it might not be. So this might be a little bit different. Whereas a lot of our whole infrastructure is, that's right. Even when you get to, retirement age and different superannuation and benefits, they are linked to the family home. And there has been an assumption in Australia that everyone has their own home. So this is really quite interesting, but it's not what we're here today. We're here talking about segmenting your markets smaller. And I think that's what it is when we're thinking we want to go big. And I know I coach lots of people from startups to scale ups, and we all want to go big quickly. And but what you're actually teaching in this chapter of yours is that yes, you want to go big, but you can grow bigger by just staying niche, doing what you do well. Is that a good way of summarizing it? Do what you do well?
I completely agree. And I think the other thing is when you have to think about the timing of when does it make sense to expand if it's a little bit adjacent to your core or a different market. And I always think, and I see this in business too, people often plan, okay, we'll start to do this and then in 3 years we're going to do this. It's actually not about the timing. It's about the penetration of the market. So the right timing is when you've actually commanded and dominated that segment of the market that you first set out to do. So you might say, once I've got a market share or market penetration of, 60, 70+%. I mean, if it's a highly competitive area, you're not going to get that much, but let's say it's an underdeveloped sort of category of something new that's not been done before. You might say, once I've been able to get, 2/3 of the market into this, which is going to be a long time, by the way, then it's going to be time to move into that next adjacent area. And I think the paradox a little bit too for particularly for startups in tech who are dealing with venture capital, there is a lot of pressure in the sense that one of the first questions a venture capitalist will ask you is, what's your scale up plan and are you taking it to other markets? I get the question all the time, are you going to do this in Canada and the UK? And we know that those housing markets in some of the cities like Toronto, Vancouver, London have similar dynamics in the affordability issues. My answer always is it's possible and it could be applicable there, but it's not in my plans. There are enough people to help here in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Canberra, and some of the other cities before we even think about expansion. Because as soon as you expand, like you say, you spread yourself so thin. And why would you dilute your efforts and dilute your resources and your investments when you haven't made the most of the one first market that you can go after? And so I think, other learnings I've had over a very long time is that regardless of who's asking you the questions or giving you the advice, just because they've got more years or might seem like they're more experienced, it doesn't mean they're right. I really think you've got to trust your gut. Your gut will tell you what's right, and your gut's never wrong. Just follow that.
That is so true. That is so true. Yes, follow your gut for sure. And I love that. Just do what you do. Do what you do well. But what you've actually said there is, stay focused in your own, not only your own lane, but on your own capacity. There's the capacity aspect that you've just raised there. So that's right. Just because you're doing something great in, you're in Sydney, someone else might be in New York or wherever, doesn't mean that you need to immediately start expanding. And I know a lot of businesses also, that can be their downfall. They can be fantastic startups, but they can crash and burn in scale up because they actually do spread themselves out too thin, and then who is going to be doing all the day-to-day operations, sort of and managing the issues and your ability to be able to produce the goods, right? Goods or services, whatever it is. If you're solving someone's problem and they're getting a fantastic service with you, can they do that if you are spreading yourself out further? And often it's no, unless you've got a lot of financial backing and you can have partners located in different areas. And well done you if you can do that and manage it, because it's then seen as all single little businesses, if you like. Yeah. Wow. So with you for this book then, what are the key tips when someone's going to purchase A Woman's Guide to Business Domination? What are they what is the biggest reason to actually tap into your chapter and go, I want to learn about Ayumi, and what's one little gem that you might draw their attention to reading about?
Look, I don't know. Like, I think what I hope is that you see something through a different lens. And I think what's great about this book, which is what makes it really interesting, is each chapter is written by a different author who brings a very different background and a very different lens to each of the chapters and the topics, right? So they're all different topics. But I think what you're going to find in there is something that you can relate to. Not everyone will relate to the chapter I've written, but you might find another chapter in there that really resonates with you and you take something good out of it. And I always find with a lot of books that are published, particularly when they're more around, I don't know what you call it, like experience or opinion, you might get one or two good things out of it. What I think is great about this book is with so many authors, what I hope is you might get a whole handful or, a dozen nuggets that you take away. So it should be quite dense and rich in little ahas or takeaways that you can then apply back to your own life or business. And I think what you're going to find as well is there's a really nice mix of very personal stories around business topics, which then makes it a lot more interesting to read. It's not going to be theory of people saying, this is how it should be done. It's not textbook. It will show you that for so many different situations, there's a different way to view things. Like, this is my point of view, that segmenting in smaller bite-sized pieces of a market and helping specific consumers is the right thing. You might read that and actually think, well, no, that doesn't apply to me. It's actually for my business. I need to go mass. So if you're selling something that has mass appeal, like it could be chocolate, I don't know, something that brings immense joy to lots of people, and people need joy, right? It might make sense to go bigger. I don't know. But what I hope it does is help you to form viewpoints on different topics that you may either not have formed viewpoints on, or help you to also reflect on your own experiences and help to drive you forward as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Great way to finish our conversation. Absolutely, everyone. There are the value of this book is exactly as Ayumi said, that you've got 18 different women from different experiences around the world, right? And so Ayumi, for one, has worked in many markets, which has been absolutely fantastic. She's in healthcare. Our next author is actually an American doctor who lives in New Zealand, Dr. Isabel. And then we've got other people who are, in the States. And so it's just a different experience. And I think that's where the value happens from a book like this, and also the community that we collaborate within amongst ourselves. And we strongly encourage all women particularly to be networking and growing and coming back. If you've read something that resonates with you in this book, definitely reach out to any of us and tap in, because we're all keen to actually just share our wisdom and to help you grow. Thank you so much for joining us at our very exciting book launch today, Ayumi. And and thank you for your amazing chapter. Really
thank you, Annie. And I do have to say, for Annie to pull this off and herd a bunch of cats like us and get this all done, it's been quite phenomenal. So, I feel really proud to be able to have been a part of this. And, I hope that everyone else who is able to pick up a copy, has a read, can enjoy it as much as all of us do as we read each other's stories. Thanks, Annie.